Welcome to this episode of Unscripted, an IICRC video program. I am Jeff Cross, the Media Director for ISSA. Today's discussion will focus on an important topic impacting the health and well-being of many watching today. We're talking about mold contamination in homes. We will shed light on how mold contamination can seriously impact the health of yourself and those in your family. And to set this up, here's a fact. Mold is more than just an unsightly problem. It's a hidden danger that can potentially cause a wide range of health issues, from respiratory problems to allergic reactions and even more serious conditions for those with compromised immune systems. What happens when a family experiences a mold event that hurts one of their loved ones? Today, we're going to find out. Let's do some introductions. I'm pleased to welcome Janelle Rogers along with her daughter, Michaela Morse. They join us to share an experience related to mold contamination. Later in the program, we'll welcome two mold experts to comment on this global issue. But Janelle, Michaela, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Thank you.
So I understand, Janelle, you have a son, Nicholas,
Yes.
who endured a tragic event related to mold contamination. It's been pinpointed to that. Can you talk about what happened? And Michaela, feel free to chime in anytime as your mom talks about this.
Okay.
Yeah, he has immune deficiency, which basically means he has an autoimmune disease that affects how he can fight any bacteria, any virus, any fungus. But in March, the beginning of March, he got a high temperature. Oh, it was over 102. So anytime he gets a high temperature, he has to go into a hospital to get intravenous fluids because he had a splenectomy. He has no spleen to help him fight. So we went in and they treated him briefly. They didn't even give him a diagnosis. They treated him on IV antibiotics and he came home. And within a week, the temperature came back. He went back in the hospital and he was there for probably a couple of weeks getting the same thing, but they didn't really give us a pinpoint as to what was going on. They just treated the temperature, sent him home again. They sent him home on IV antibiotics at home. He did a round for 2 weeks. We did it 3 times a day. We had to hook him up to an IV pole, and they thought that would be the end of it. We were on the last day of the intravenous antibiotic, and that next morning he woke up and he couldn't see out of his left eye. He couldn't see the left side of his left eye. So he was Googling. He thought he had a detached retina. Back to the hospital. We went right back to the same hospital.
So how old is Nicholas?
How old? 26.
So he Googled his own symptoms.
Yes, he's very good at Googling.
Aren't we all these days?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to hear the troubles you went through and that nothing could be resolved at that time. But what happened next? He couldn't see, back to the hospital again. What happened?
Yep. So now it's April. He went through a month in the hospital pretty much. So we went back. We went back to the same hospital. We went to Advent Orlando and they admitted him because he still had systemic issues going on. He was still fighting a bacteria. He's immune compromised. So they put him back on antibiotics. They called in ophthalmology, which is one thing I didn't know, that if you have an eye emergency, they say go to the eye doctor. But because Nicholas is so compromised with everything, fighting viruses, that we went to the hospital. So ophthalmology just looked at his eye, say on Monday, and they thought maybe CMV. They thought it might be varicella. They treated him with all these antibiotics again. Tuesday, there's just watching his eye. He was kind of losing more sight on the left side. He could still see. Wednesday, Thursday, they're doing the same treatment. They hadn't started anything new. And then on Friday, I think it was, they said, we do not have a retina specialist here and you need to see a retina specialist. So we wasted 5 days not treating the eye. And I know the eye is very sensitive. You know, you need treatment right away. So they discharged him with an IV in his arm and said, Janelle, drive him to Miami, Florida, where there's like the #1 eye institute, Bascom Palmer. It's an outpatient. So I don't understand why they sent us to outpatient, because he needed inpatient care. So we did that.
At that point, he could only see light and shadows. So he lost his vision completely with that. But when you could see light and shadow, there is still a chance that your vision can come back.
And we're talking in one eye?
Yes, just his
Okay.
left eye.
His left eye.
And we were worried now about, is this going to go to the right eye? You know, we don't know anything about, we didn't even know what was happening yet.
So
had
you
no
went to
clue.
Miami trying to find a specialist. You
We
need
went
help.
to Miami. We sat in the,
It's unfortunate that the medical world sometimes can't see things right away, but they're trying. You're
they were,
trying.
they were.
What happened next?
So in Miami, we went to the eye institute that I said was outpatient. So we waited all night long in the emergency room. When they finally pulled him in, they said, this is very serious. They still didn't know what was happening, but he was, like Michaela said, losing his vision. So they took cultures. Everything was negative. They gave him antibiotics in the eye. And then he was admitted to the hospital down there, inpatient. And from there, he really went into a psychosis. They gave him so many drugs that he wasn't even like conscious. He was there for almost a month. And every day, inpatient, ophthalmology would come to look at his eye. And as long as he saw light, that they said that he could get his vision back. So we were there for 3-4 weeks. And they would come every day. And on the last few days, when he was getting ready for discharge, he really did go through a lot there. He had sepsis, he had a pneumonia, he had everything.
He stopped seeing light and shadows.
So every day, ophthalmology would tell us, as soon as you're discharged, come back to the Eye Institute. So when he was getting near discharge, I was questioning why they didn't have that appointment made. And they said, because he can't see light anymore. Like, nobody told us that. Once you can't see light, your eye is gone. So he didn't follow up. They discharged him, and he still wasn't healthy, but we came home. And within days, his eye was all red. His arms were bloating up because of other issues. He has blood clots that went undetected. So within 3 days, then we went to a different hospital. This has gone on for we're going into 7 months now of
7
figuring this
months.
out. Yeah.
Okay.
Still no answers.
Right. So what happened with his vision? It's gone. What happened to his eye?
It is gone. The vision's gone. We still had no answers. They, again, said different things, endophthalmitis, which is inflammation of the eye, but there was no reason for it. Like, everything came back negative. And they did test cultures of his blood, cultures of his eye.
Everything was coming back negative.
Yeah. It's hard to remember, I'm sure, because of being a traumatic event. So does he have a prosthetic eye now?
Yeah, so that's it. When we came back, he was not doing well. So we went to a different hospital. We went to Mayo, and they tested his eye again. They pulled fluid, did a biopsy, and they found aspergillus growing. So it was emergency surgery. Next day, they said, come in and we need to remove the eye because it was seeping into his body.
Have you heard of that word before?
Never. I've heard the word mold.
Hmm.
lightly, just from people,
Sure.
talking, but no detail. I've never heard of aspergillus.
When the doctors told you that, what did they say the cause was? Did they
A
pinpoint
fungus,
it?
a fungus in his body. They did. Well, then I thought, well, we should check our house.
Hmm.
Maybe there's mold in the house. Just moved to Florida from Massachusetts.
Okay.
And when I talk about fungus, everybody says to me, "Oh, it's Florida."
You
But
didn't know.
I did not know anything about fungus, mold growing in the humidity, in the climate. And I guess we all breathe it in, all of us, but some people can't fight that because he's so compromised that
And there are many types of molds.
there is.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So, so they found mold in your home,
they did. I had a girl
and
come out and she found
you're
mold.
talking about an IICRC professional.
Yes.
Okay, what'd they find?
And I don't have the full report yet.
Hmm.
I talked to her and she said she found mold on Nicholas's desk and in my bedroom, on the floor in the corner, and then around the windows where, like in the winter, the precip, what's the word?
When the windows sweat in the winter.
Is why we think that was there, but it's not aspergillus, but it's the mold that grows aspergillus. So I don't know the word for that.
That's okay. No one here is an expert on mold. We leave that to the
Yeah.
mold experts at IICRC.
Mhm.
But we all know everyone has a different reaction to different molds. Unfortunately, Nicholas had a reaction, and the doctors pinpointed that to the mold contamination.
They did.
Okay.
Yes.
Michaela, as you saw this happen as Nicholas's sister, what were you thinking? Were you like, we should have known this, or there should have been warning signs?
Um, it was shocking for sure because I grew up like he was always medical, but he was also never like babied or protected. He was always out in the dirt with me. And it's like, I don't know, like how come now? Just because the climate we live in, it was shocking.
The thing is about mold, I do know this, that you see it all the time, as mentioned. You said we breathe, we inhale it. There's mold in
Hmm.
shower stalls. We just sometimes don't know. But what do you take from this? Obviously, Nicholas is going to be okay. It sounds like,
Hmm.
unfortunately, with lack of vision in one eye and a prosthetic eye.
Yep.
What are you going to think about when you see mold in the future?
I would just be so cautious. You know what? I wish they did mold inspections when you buy homes. Like I would not, they didn't do that here. I don't even know if they do it, but I would encourage that, especially in a climate where it's humid.
Yeah, I'm not sure the law state to state, it's all different. Mold
Yeah.
inspections could be required in some states. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that you did contact the IICRC and an inspector, and we're going to talk to her in a moment. But how important that is to have a professional just walk through a home and take a look and make sure it's safe for you and your family. When did you move there?
We moved here in 2021. We moved to this house in 2022.
So you weren't there very long.
No, we haven't been here long.
Okay. Anything else that we're forgetting that you'd like to add to our talk today?
It it just makes me upset that I didn't know all this
Mhm.
before because I feel like I compromised my son's eye, and it all just went on for so long that it's just a shame. I think that even in humid, like, why don't doctors know about mold infestation in the body? Another thing we didn't mention is that it went on for so long undiagnosed. He also has these lesions from aspergillus in his brain. So he's now taken seizure meds, and they found aspergillus in his heart, which caused either dissection or aortic aneurysm. And they also found spots on his heart from this same infection, like it went through his whole body. So he has possible heart surgery now in the future on top, but I don't think he's healthy enough to have that. So the
Well,
future's kind of unknown.
yes, I understand that. And I feel for you and your family, but I know one thing for Nicholas. He's got a family that supports him, that loves him, that's not to blame because mold contamination happens quietly. It can just be there, but we do want to do our best to find it and get it out of our homes.
Yeah, I'm so glad we did get the inspection because now we can be proactive. We're going to get dehumidifiers and
Air purifiers.
air purifiers for his room and all the rooms.
Yeah.
Replace photos. We got some projects ahead of us now.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
you're doing the very best you can. Thank you for your time today and take good care of Nicholas. I hope he has a speedy recovery through all of his issues related to this contamination. So that's the story of a family who went through a mold contamination that impacted their son, Nicholas, and even took his eye. It's a sad story. I do know that Nicholas has a loving family who will care for him. But what can you do as you watch this unfold to protect your own family? Well, let's talk to two IICRC approved instructors, mold experts who know what they're looking for and offer some advice to anyone who possibly could have mold contamination in their home. So at this time, I'm pleased to welcome two dedicated industry experts to our program. We have with us Mark Cornelius and Holly Burns. They're both IICRC approved instructors who teach IICRC Applied Microbial Remediation Technician course. Holly, Mark, thank you for joining us today.
It's
Thank
great to
you.
be here. Thank you so much.
For those who have been through issues where the mold has affected their health, or those who are concerned about the future, let's talk about that a bit from a professional viewpoint. My first question is, where do people find mold in homes usually? And I imagine mold in a shower is not a reason to panic. What do you think, Holly?
So you're exactly right. Mold is commonly found in showers, basements, and any other damp place. So while seeing mold in the shower isn't necessarily cause for alarm, it's still important to be able to clean it promptly to prevent it from spreading. Everyday mold in these areas is often manageable with regular cleaning, but I will also say, in addition to that, it will help in bathrooms to run the exhaust fan and run it during showering, as well as approximately 8 minutes after. It'll mitigate any additional water that or moisture that's in that bathroom. So there are ways to mitigate mold throughout the property. It's just when it's a larger area that can be significant.
Good advice, running that fan. I don't think I do that, but maybe something to think about. Mark, anything to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. Jeff, the not all homes, special order homes have vent fans. They have windows that nobody wants to open because it's either too cold outside or too hot outside. The whole point of that is it's to release that moisture out of that bathroom. At least get an oscillating fan and get the moisture out of it because that's where the concentration of that is. But also going into where do you find mold? Mold can be anywhere, and I know we're talking about homes here, but let's just say for example, like in a commercial building, or even at home, someone knocks over a mop bucket. It's only 5 gallons of water. Nobody thinks it's a big deal. There's no water pipes anywhere near the source area. There's no windows. Well, the next thing you know, that water that didn't get properly cleaned up, there is a chunk of mold going inside the wall cavity because 5 gallons of water got spilled. So we have our usual suspects that we go look for: water pipes, windows, doors, windows, those kind of things. But the challenging ones are ones where we don't find it there, and we're basically becoming crime scene investigators trying to figure out where it's hiding on us. But the bathrooms, you're right that there is there. The biggest thing is that, clean the water up, and here's another tip: do a better job cleaning your shower and get the food source out of there too.
Okay, so we picked on bathrooms a little bit. Let's talk about other areas in the home. I walk down to my basement. It smells a little damp, but then I notice in the corner on some sheetrock some mold growing. Do I panic at that point? What is the trigger that tells me I need to do something now? What do you think, Mark? Let's start with you on that one.
Well, if you walk down in your basement and it smells musty, well, that little bit of spotted mold that you can see is just a little pinprick.
Hmm.
If you can smell it, then even if you can't see it, if you can smell it, you've got mold. And I know a lot of people are told that they can't say there's mold, it has to be tested. And well, I mean, I'm sorry, but if you have a water source and it smells musty and you see fuzzy things growing on the wall, it's mold. I just can't tell you the species. But if you have an indicator of a smell, then you probably have a little bit bigger problem than, little spot of mold on the wall that big.
Hmm. Holly, you do inspections, correct?
Yes,
Talk
I
about what
do.
you look for. Like what would trigger you like, oh, we have an issue here. This is not just a
So,
small area. Talk about that.
yeah, definitely Mark is absolutely 100% correct about a musty odor. That's something that we do try to determine. But also, as Mark was saying, fuzzy things, but we look for discoloration and colonization in certain areas. Um, Obviously, panic isn't necessary, but immediate action is. And so, if there's mold covering, and typically throughout the United States, it's 10 square feet, with the exception of Texas, 25 square feet. That's something that is a significant. But even with that being said, a lot of times, as Mark was saying, you can smell something musty, and it might be in your air conditioning system. And so, at any time that there is a concern, it's time to call a professional. And anyone in the household, especially if they're experiencing any health issues that could be related to mold exposure, then I would say don't wait to get help. But what I'm looking for is discoloration. I'm looking for high moisture content levels. I'm looking for relative humidity too. Because if the humidity is high, typically they're stating through ASHRAE and other organizations that we should be within 30 to 50% relative humidity. That controls colds, flus, viruses, dust mites, and mold. So if there's high relative humidity, that's something that needs to be addressed. And one of the ways that I usually say homeowners can do that is they can get a temperature gauge. It kind of helps them see what the temperature is and what the relative humidity is in the home. And so if it starts to peak up over 60%, then there's something that needs to be looked at and addressed. And that's another way that homeowners can mitigate the home in their house or the mold in their home.
Jeff, if I may, I want to throw one more comment. And this is what I teach in every one of my classes. Everybody walks in and they use your phrase, panic. When should I panic? Everybody walks in, they see mold and they go, there's mold. Okay, yeah, you got mold. The question I ask is, where's the water? Mold is the symptom, water is the disease. And everybody's looking for the mold. Well, I'm going to find the mold when I find the water. So I look at it as giving someone an ibuprofen for a broken leg. Well, it takes away the pain, but the leg still broke. So we got to find the water. So yeah, the mold is a manifestation that you can see and smell, but that's not the problem. The problem is stopping the water, or the mold's going to come back no matter how many times you wipe it off with bleach.
There's some watching this who might say, well, I live in a dry area, maybe Nevada. Holly, you mentioned Texas has different rules with a number of square feet to trigger a response. But does it
Sure.
matter where the home is in the country or any country, I suppose?
Actually, it's not. And people say, well, Holly, you live in Florida. You must deal with a lot of mold.
Hmm.
Well, we do have higher temperatures and higher humidity levels, sure, but really anywhere that's susceptible to mold. And as Mark was saying, water intrusion, elevated water intrusion is definitely the trigger for mold to grow. So, I would say homes with poor ventilation, older construction, even newer construction that are designed for energy efficiency can lead to problems if ventilation is not properly designed in that property. It can lead to microbial bloom. So coastal regions, areas with heavy rainfall, regions in higher humidity, sure. But throughout globally, there can be significant mold issues if enough water is intruded into the property.
I heard a comment earlier, thank you, Holly, about if you it could be in the HVAC system. Mark, when you think about that, what do you think needs to be done if there's smells coming from the ductwork? That's got to be a big issue.
Well, Jeff, first of all, I'm not an HVAC contractor. I'm an amateur a lot of things, and I'm an amateur HVAC contractor too. But Rochelle and I, my wife, actually Thanksgiving last year, got called to go to Grenada to do a bunch of inspections, and two of the buildings that we looked at was a hospital. And the air conditioning system was the biggest part of the problem because it was not installed right. Whoever installed it had no idea what they were doing, and it was causing condensation. And they had like their thermostat 10 foot up in the air. Well, it's in the wrong zone. So the air conditioner can contribute to it. It can cause it, or it can act as a super highway. You've got a room that's got mold in it. A register is not as big of a deal, but a return is a huge deal because if it's sucking the air out of the room that's got bloom in it, then it's now just blowing it throughout the entire house. So a lot of people don't think about the air conditioning system really needs to be zeroed in on because it can either A, be causing it, contributing to it, but it also has to be addressed. A lot of times it's going to have to be clean, and not just every single air conditioning clean company that's out there that has a little brush that rolls around inside of it is really qualified to do it. So you really need to have someone that has NACA training, understands about the IICRC's, inspection standards, and they really specialize on this industry. So the air conditioner is a huge concern, and I had it in my own house where our system malfunctioned, and I didn't realize the damper system had shut down for the basement, and the humidity in the basement just went off the chain. And the next thing you know, including my cat had gooey eyes. So I had to do my own mold remediation in my own house about 4 years ago. So the air conditioner is the lungs of a building.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to talk about, because people are concerned about when they see mold, how do they know it's dangerous? Holly, I know we talked about you doing inspections. When you go into a home, how often do you see mold that you're like, we need to do something about this now? Is that common?
So, it's a great question because it's challenging to determine the danger of mold just by looking at it. There's so many species of mold, and some molds are more toxic than others, but all molds should be addressed, right? Testing by a professional and having that testing, whether it's air sampling, surface swab sampling, being sent to a laboratory for analysis, can really help us determine if it is a very big problem or a minor problem that needs to be addressed by somebody who is a remediation professional, IICRC trained. So it will help determine the type of molds, and then the necessary scope of work, the necessary remediation steps that need to follow.
Thank you. Mark, in your classes, and I believe you've got one today, you're teaching students about mold and related topics. Do you teach them how to test for mold?
I actually do my best to persuade them to, if they want to test for mold, they need to learn how to test for mold. And the AMRT class is not a mold testing class. Yeah, you can, it's a common phrase in the industry. I can probably teach anybody how to be a pump jockey in a couple of hours. Okay, well, I can teach you how to plug an air mover into a wall and turn it on in about 45 minutes, but it doesn't mean you know how to use that air mover properly either. So we do reach that information and we do discuss it, but just because you can pull an air sample and fill out a chain of custody doesn't mean that you have any idea what that lab report actually means or what is elevated versus not elevated. So if they want to take on the liability of maybe doing something that's going to make someone sick for a couple of bucks, then I think they're nuts. All right. I do samples, I read lab reports, but I've also been doing it for almost 42 years. And even though I don't have a degree, I have worked with a ton of industrial hygienists, and they've explained to me what they're looking at on these reports. So no, I don't teach people how to do samples in class. We just talk about what the IEP does, the importance of the IEP, and then stay in your lane.
So it takes a multifaceted approach to do this correctly. Is that right, Holly? Someone has to do the
Yeah, so
testing. Mhm.
that's exactly right. And as Mark was saying, the inspections typically, and I think you asked this before, Jeff, inspections typically involve a thorough examination. Our visual inspection is just as important as any other data analysis. Moisture mapping, air sampling, surface swab sampling, and then, like I said, sending it to a laboratory for analysis. Remediation, on the other hand, involves removing the mold, addressing the moisture source, as Mark was saying, and then restoring the affected areas. Costs, that's a question I get all the time. Costs vary widely in mold assessments. And it really is dependent upon the severity, but it can range from a few $100s to several $1,000s. Again, in severe cases, you may need to vacate the home temporarily, but it's not always necessary. So the amount of mold that's there based upon the laboratory analysis can tell us the scope of work and the next steps that need to happen from a remediation contractor standpoint.
That was going to be one of my next questions about cost, because people, they're not expecting this to happen. They see mold, they call you, Holly, or Mark. You do your test, you're like, yep, we need to do something about this. Now they're thinking, who's going to pay? So, Mark, talk about that. Who's going to pay for this?
Unfortunately, when it comes to mold, and this is something that people just don't like to hear, and I've even had people accuse me of being a closet adjuster or defending insurance companies, and I'm not an adjuster and I don't defend insurance companies. There's bad on all sides of the fence. But a lot of the times, mold turns out to be neglect. And an insurance policy doesn't go for negligence. And so, therefore, a lot of times it winds up being self pay. And the homeowner, uh, most homeowners barely have their deductible saved up in the bank as it is, let alone finding out that it's going to be $4,000 or $5,000. So, as Holly said, price can be all over the board. And I'll often have people trying to back me into a corner, and they'll say, give me a ballpark. And I'm like, okay, give me a minute. And I'll go and I'll pull up my phone and I'll go to Zillow and I'll find out what the, estimated value of that house is. And I'll say, Holly, it's going to be more than $1 and less than 2.35 million, because that's what your house sold for last year. And then they're like, oh, come on, what's what worst case scenario? Okay, well, we bulldoze your house to the slab and we rebuild it from there. It's impossible for me to give pricing, and people are expecting us to be able to say it's going to be $5.53. Unfortunately for us, there are a ton of people that are out there that don't want to follow standards, and they're in a race for the bottom for the price. And if it's $5,000 to do the remediation process properly, and they're going to do it for 800, well, they're going to go with the $800 guy.
Which is human nature. We're being honest. Holly, as you heard Mark talking about this, the health aspect has to come into play here. Money's one thing, but protecting your health, your family. Do you have those conversations with your clients?
I do. However, I am not a physician, and uh, and so it's best if they take the laboratory report to their own physician, their primary care physician or specialist, and determine if any of those molds are specific to the health issues that um, they're having at that particular moment. So that's one of the suggestions I have, because their primary care physician is the only one that's going to know their background, health history, and if they are immunocompromised, that's something that is definitely something to be concerned about, because they are more, it's more of an adverse reaction for them to have from mold exposure. And so those are the conversations I typically have with clients.
I think that's great advice to have them go talk to their physician because they need to be healthy, that's for sure. Mark, I know you
Yes.
love to talk politics. Now let's talk about government influence on all of this. Let's start with you on this. Do you think that's a good thing if government mandates that only licensed contractors work on mold? Maybe IICRC certified firms are the ones you should use. Does that come into your conversations in your classes and with your network?
Constantly. Um, First of all, I'm going to preface that by saying I think the government is great at doing one thing, and that's messing everything up they touch. They're really good at that. However, our own industry, for some reason, can't find a way to regulate ourselves. It is still years, even after the whole Melinda Ballard, thing. It's still the wild, wild west out there. Everybody's doing whatever it is. They've got a new juice. They've got this. They've got this machine. And I won't go into a lot of depth on it, but I just showed up in my social media feed about this new, UV thing that will clear the whole house. So unfortunately, government intervention is going to happen. It's already happening, and seeing it happen constantly. And fortunately, I have a little bit more exposure to it, being on the board and serving on several committees. I just found out literally on Thursday, I think it is, that Illinois just passed legislation unanimously. They haven't completely ironed out all of the bugs of it yet, but the government's getting into it big time, and it's happening at a higher pace. I am pleased and excited that a lot of them are using IICRC and they're referencing S520. For example, the state of Kentucky just adopted the entire S520 as its standard for mold remediation. And just recently, the state of Virginia, as of July 1st of this year, you can't do mold remediation in the state of Virginia unless you have the IICRC AMRT certification, which did ruffle some feathers. I caught a lot of flack about that because they thought the IICRC was muscling in and trying to make it clear this certification didn't count. Their own legislation, their own government drafted that bill, and it was bipartisan and it passed unanimously. And fortunately, Robbie, who's our government advocate person at IICRC, is smart, and he has software on his computer, and it dinged his computer and it said, hey, this legislation is going up for vote. And he was able to get some words changed in it because there was some not good stuff in their legislation because that's not their lane. But guys, I mean, I'm here to tell you that as soon as a government agency finds out they can get a licensing fee and they can probably get some, fines and penalties, oh, they're all over that. But it's happening faster and faster because Kentucky, Virginia, a couple of other areas within the last 2 years have all of a sudden started jumping on it. And it's all the way to the city level. The city of Portland, Oregon requires that you have mold remediation training, so a certificate. There's like 3 or 4 different courses that they accept. It's coming, and it's going to run you over, and whether you like it or not. And unfortunately, it does have a benefit, that in theory there's a pain of penalty if we don't follow the rules. But it would be better if we would just keep our own nose clean.
Yes. We see in industries, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, that government does have rules and regulations and everyone has to follow. And we're seeing that more in the cleaning and restoration industries, especially restoration. And so that's why I asked the question, because we do see it coming. We ran in Clean Facts an article about Illinois making some adjustments to require IICRC
And it
involvement.
passed 55-0. It was unanimous.
Mhm. And Holly, what do you think? Any additional thoughts on that? Do you like what's happening? Do you hope?
So I do. I hope that there are more standards. I don't want to say standards, but more regulations on mold remediation, because as Mark was saying, it is the wild, wild west, and the things that I see when I go out and do an assessment and remediation, things I hear when I teach an AMRT class. So there is a growing trend towards government regulation and mold remediation. It is happening. Some states, like I've mentioned before, require licensing for mold assessors and mold remediators. And I think there are more states that are following suit. So there's ongoing discussion about expanding these regulations, specifically as to the point you mentioned, Jeff, to ensure public health is protected at the end of the day. And the structures are protected with their integrity. So I do like what I'm seeing.
Thank you. As a final point, because we're about out of time, if I find mold in my basement, and Mark, I hope I don't. You laid
It's not
out
fun.
nicely some thoughts there, and Holly as well. I'm going to need help. What IICRC is there to help? How does that work? How do we find someone? How do we need, like in your areas where you teach, you have students, you train them, they're the experts in the industry. How do I find them?
And there is it's a great search engine on iicrc.org to find somebody who is certified. But if somebody has an issue, they should contact a certified professional. And ideally someone who is IICRC certified, because these professionals, as Mark and I do, we train them. They are trained to handle mold safely and effectively, ensuring that homes are restored to a healthy environment. At the end of the day, that's what we're hoping for. That's what we're looking for.
Well, I do want to say thank you both for your time today, and thank you for training industry professionals who are there to help protect the public from things like mold. Until mold is gone forever, you're both going to be needed.
Well, I
Yes.
guess we're going to be here forever.
Exactly. Thank you
Thank
both.
you so much. Thank you.